Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we're once again going to discuss several leaks that I managed to find and that I think are pretty interesting to talk about. As always, all of this information comes from fairly credible sources. Alright, now let's move on to the main topic. In the previous video, we talked about the possibility of Acheron finally getting a brand new skin. For those of you who haven't watched that discussion yet, I highly recommend checking it out first. This time, we'll be moving on to another equally interesting topic: the various changes Morblade received in Beta 4.3 v4. As usual, all of this information comes from a fairly credible source, namely Gacha Base. So without wasting any more time, let's jump straight into the discussion. A few hours ago, Beta 4.3 v4 was finally officially released. And for those of you who thought this version wouldn't bring any major changes, well, that assumption turned out to be slightly wrong. Unlike most v4 beta updates that usually only contain wording adjustments or minor text changes, this v4 actually introduced several fairly significant changes to Morblade that are worth taking a closer look at. The changes affect multiple parts of his kit, including his ultimate, trace, and even his Idolans. So without further delay, let's start with the very first change. And that is Morblade's ultimate. As we already know, Morblade has two different ultimates. The first ultimate functions to activate his zone, while the second ultimate is the one that actually deals damage to enemies. The change introduced in v4 specifically affects his first ultimate. At first glance, this change honestly looks like a pretty massive nerf. The energy cost required to activate Morblade's first ultimate has been increased significantly. Previously, it only required 80 energy, but now it costs 160 energy, literally double the previous amount. With this adjustment, the energy cost of his first ultimate is now identical to his second ultimate, which also requires 160 energy. And naturally, if you only look at these numbers on the surface, it's understandable why many players immediately assumed that Morblade got heavily nerfed in v4. However, as we're about to discuss next, there's another side to this change that we need to examine more carefully before jumping to conclusions. The second change affects Morblade's trace, and this is actually the key to understanding the context behind the ultimate energy cost adjustment. Out of Morblade's 3 traces, only the first trace received changes in v4. The first effect of the trace remains the same as before. Morblade can still accumulate up to 80 overflow energy. However, the second effect of this trace received a very important adjustment. Previously, this trace would automatically restore Morblade's energy up to 50% whenever his energy was below 50% at the start of battle or whenever his zone was dispelled. Now, that value has been increased to 75%, meaning Morblade will immediately gain energy equal to 75% of his maximum energy. So now, with his ultimate energy cost sitting at 160, 75% of that value equals 120 energy. That means when the battle begins, Morblade will already start with 120 energy and only needs to gain an additional 40 energy to activate his first ultimate. And if we compare this to the previous beta version, where his first ultimate only cost 80 energy, but the trace only restored 50% or 40 energy, players still needed to gain an extra 40 energy before activating the ultimate. In other words, despite the massive-looking increase in energy cost, the actual time required to activate Morblade's first ultimate remains practically unchanged. What initially looked like a huge nerf was actually very carefully compensated for through the adjustment to his first trace. Aside from that adjustment, according to the Renegade summary shared by Galaxy Leaks, this first trace also received an additional new effect that works as a pretty useful quality of life improvement. The new effect grants a CC cleanse whenever Morblade reaches max energy. So if Morblade gets hit by crowd control effects while simultaneously having full energy, this trace will automatically cleanse that CC effect. Admittedly, The activation condition for this effect is fairly specific and probably won't occur consistently in every battle. But even so, as an added quality of life bonus, it's still much better than having nothing at all. Now let's move on to the third and final change, Morblade's Idolans. Out of all 6 Idolans, only Idolan 2 received changes in V4. And honestly, when players first saw the Idolan 2 changes on Gacha base, a lot of people were absolutely shocked because the listed changes looked incredibly massive. The EN translation stated that the follow-up attack damage dealt by allies had been increased to 700%, up from the previous 75%, which obviously sounds completely absurd. However, I need to clarify that this 700% value was actually just an error in the English translation and not the real change. If we look at the CN version instead, the multiplier remains exactly the same at 75%. So there was actually no change to that value whatsoever. The real adjustment made to Idolan 2 is the addition of a brand new effect. Now, the amount of charge Morblade needs in order to trigger his extra skill has been reduced to only 7 charges. So compared to the previous requirement of 9 charges, Morblade now only needs to accumulate 7. And honestly, this is a really good addition. With the lower threshold, Morblade will now trigger his extra skill much more frequently, which directly improves his overall offensive output compared to before. If we summarize all the changes introduced in Beta 4.3 V4, we can honestly conclude that these adjustments overall lean far more toward buffs rather than nerfs for Morblade. The ultimate energy cost increase may initially look like a massive nerf, but it was already fully compensated through the adjustments to his first trace. In practice, there's basically no meaningful difference in terms of ultimate activation timing. And on top of that, Morblade also received an additional CC Cleanse quality of life effect, as well as a reduced charge threshold on Idolan 2. Because of that, Morblade honestly looks even more solid now as we get closer to his eventual release. Personally, I'm really curious to see what Morblade's final state will look like in Beta V5 later on. So, what do you guys think about all the V4 changes? Do you think Morblade is already in a good enough state right now? Or do you still think he needs further adjustments, whether in the form of buffs or even nerfs? Feel free to share your opinions and analysis down in the comments section below. Alright, with that, we've reached the end of today's discussion. Thank you all so much for your time and attention for watching this video all the way until the end. Don't forget to share this video with your fellow Honkai starrail players so they won't miss this information as well. Your support through likes and subscriptions truly means a lot to this channel. Thank you once again for watching, and I'll see you all in the next discussion.